Thank you guys so much for joining us. This is the first talk which Dazed MENA curated in collaboration with Seoul DXB, which is very exciting. And it's called Beyond Brick and Mortar, Redefining Architecture and Impermanence with the architect herself, Sara Bokr. She's incredible. Sarra is a Palestinian architect, space designer, furniture maker, and a 3D artist based in Dubai. She's also the founder of Circ Studio, which is a architecture and interior design, I guess, hub. It does everything. And her innovative, playful approach to design sees her combine architecture with her other disciplines to create really emotionally resonant spaces and objects. She's done incredible things, which we'll get into, from designing shelters for workers and private breastfeeding spaces for women in public, and raising a lot of awareness around the architecture of violence in Palestine. She's also designed spaces for Seoul DXB and Adidas Original, Hypebeast. She's done a lot. So let's get into it. To start, what got you into architecture? What inspired you to get into it?
First of all, thank you everyone for coming. Thank you, Sarah, for being my moderator. I love that you're my moderator. Yeah. We were talking how our conversation today might be a bit brain rot. Like we're not going to be very formal. So
definitely,
this is not like a, I'm not giving like a, I don't know, like a presentation about architecture. It's going to be a bit of everything, right? Yeah. Okay, your question was. I forgot your question.
How did you get into architecture? What inspired you? How did it
So I think one of my everything that happened with me during childhood was what inspired me to become an architect, or is what inspired me to study architecture, right? So I think my earliest memories was kind of my parents handing over the IKEA catalogs they would get when they buy furniture, and like trusting me with assembling them, because I would love to look at those catalogs. I think they're on the presentation. They're usually always in Swedish, right? But you like kind of get the hang of it. And I was so intrigued by I think the little drawings, the little axonometric drawings and how they're assembled. That's one of the earliest memories where I was like, okay, I love like assembling things. I love putting things together. But yeah, and I would say one other thing is literally playing The Sims on my PS.
You were a Sim girl?
Yeah,
I never got into The Sims, but I like
you
did
didn't?
I was a Club Penguin girl.
We're literally the same age, like
I know. I just wasn't so cool.
Club Penguin is also the same idea. It's so the idea of kind of designing or creating your own world, right? Your sim is you, and then everything around it is literally architecture. Like you're literally building your life, right? So I was obsessed. I was obsessed with that game. I had 3 CDs. I remember having The Sims Castaway. So your sim is stuck on an island, and you have to, get them food, feed them, build them shelter. And this really, when I study architecture, I'm just always thinking about The Sims Castaway, because
I love that.
the essence of architecture is a shelter, right? It's the shelter, the hearth. But yeah, I remember just being so obsessed with The Sims and Club Penguin, Pit Society on Facebook. I don't know if you're.
Yeah, I know it. Yeah.
Okay. But all these games online where you would build your life. Also watching the Jetsons on Space Tune. I watched it in Arabic. It was dubbed.
Really?
Yes, and I remember just being mesmerized and so intrigued by the structures. They were on these long poles, right? And they were so playful and things you wouldn't see in real life. And it was this utopia where, the family lives in, everything's so easy, everything is so futuristic. And I was very I would daydream about living in that city where they live.
Really?
Yeah, I would mention to my parents how what if we get cars and put magnets on them and then build all the streets with metal. So the magnet would repel the streets, and I would just think of ways of how we should live in a futuristic city. I don't know. It was just
I love that. It started from world building. Literally,
yeah, I think world building and just having the sense of thinking of the future, right? Yeah.
But that's something that you do so well. I think you're quite future oriented in your practice in general.
I am, but I'm also I'm always thinking of what I went through during childhood, like my thoughts and ideas during childhood, I think is what truly like is still with me within my design, right?
Yeah, so you mentioned to me when we spoke that you grew up in a Syrian refugee camp.
Yes.
Did that shape your understanding of design and architecture in any way?
So I didn't grow. I was born there, and I spent 3 years of my childhood there.
Okay.
And then we would visit every summer.
Okay.
And we would visit for like 3 months. So I technically did grow up like quarterly.
I mean, you know, the first 5 years of your life is where you kind of cement, I think, your knowledge of the world
100%.
in many ways.
100%.
So that's interesting.
Which one of these? My sister is the one in blue, and the pink is me. And then, guys, and then literally the one where like a lot of children guess which one I am. Like I'm the boy. I'm the boy with the bangs. In the middle. But growing, like having my summers be in Syria was actually the best. We were surrounded by family all the time, a lot of children, a lot of people, and that was really nice. But I think whenever I say I grew up or my family lives in a refugee camp, they just think that we live in like tent structures.
They don't get it.
And like this, there is no streets. It's all like just gravel. But it's really not. It began as tent structures when my great-grandparents fled during the Nakba, 1948, to Syria. It did begin as tent structures. The bathroom was just a hole in the ground. But obviously, as time passed by and as things evolved and as architecture and methods evolved, they just started building their own structures. And it was, it started from clay to stone to concrete. And now the entire refugee camp, I would say refugee even neighborhood, is just buildings.
That's amazing. It's architecture from resilience, I think.
Literally, yeah.
And finding belonging and carving it out. And it's interesting how creating that through architecture and that built environment holds so many stories as well.
100%. I always think of how each family kind of fled from the Nakba to Syria, and how each of them, they just took a spot. And that spot is now their house, their like tower building house, like 3-story, And I'm just like, okay, it's literally the act of existing where you're like, okay, this is the part where I'll build. This is gonna become my land, and I'll build it.
Amazing.
And so it makes you think of how like, I don't know, it just makes you think about settlements and makes you think about occupied architecture and but that's for another day.
Yeah, for a whole other conversation. That's for a guest edit on Dazed. Okay, so when did your design start coming to life? Like going from sketches or ideas to like actually build structures, and also how does it feel like to see like structure?
It's insane.
Like
It's all
must be crazy.
Honestly, like it's crazy. I think so during uni we would just design and make models, 3D model, and our designs wouldn't. You don't build them, right? They're just concepts.
Yeah.
The only time I built something during my architecture school years was when I took design build, and it was making. I made like a concrete chair, but it was really like small scale, and I spent like 3 months of the semester just like designing it and making drawings and building it with my partner Nada. And that was the first time I would like make something, that's like functional. You would sit on, come into real life. But the actual first time that I made something on paper, like draw it, design it, 3D model it, and like have it be built, was Seoul. And
no way.
Yes, it was Seoul. It was
so
Seoul
Yes,
it was Seoul 2022. I did 2 things. I did the Rascals pop-up, and then I did Precious Trust with Wathik. We built it by hand, literally, like.
Wow.
But that it was just like an insane feeling, like just seeing things turn from drawings and 3D modeling into like real life, and like just you passing under, I don't know, just you passing under the roof, and like how like I do that a lot, and I just like go around and like touch it, I just look like an old grandma like reminiscing, but it's just insane, I guess.
Wow, I love that. Can you tell me more about like what was the thinking behind designing Seoul or the Rascals thing? Like, where did that come from? Were you referencing anything?
Yeah, I think so. When I graduated uni, I was working at I was working a normal job as an architect. I was making technical drawings, and I had just graduated. So I did this modeling gig for Talal, the guy who owns Rascals, and at the time I was a student, right? And he asked, oh, like, what do you do? I'm like, I'm gonna graduate this year, like in 3 months. I'm gonna be an architect. And he's like, oh, okay, sick. 3 months later or 4 months later, he hits me up. He calls me and he's like, hey, did you graduate? I'm like, yeah, I did. He's like, hey, like, I want you to design the pop-up, my Rascals. I'm making this pop-up, this deli sandwich shop, and I want you to design it. I'm like, no way. Like, I literally got a feeling in my stomach. I was really scared because I was like, I've never done anything in real life, right? Like, everything I did was like on paper or on my screen. But I said yes. I said, oh my God, yes, like I'll take it, I'll do it.
Yeah.
And I remember, this is hilarious. I remember like making the technical drawings, which you pass on to the contractor and they look at it and build it from there, right? Making them so detailed because I was scared like they'll mess it up, even though it was just a rectangle, literally with like 2 windows. But I literally like made the layers, put installation, put the like structures, even though like they did not need any of that. They just need like a 3 drawings, like of the front, the sides.
Yeah.
But I did everything. I went all off. And it was just like this playful, small deli, very like retro vibes. It was green. There was the thought behind it was to just make it really functional. Pick up an order and have a menu and a bit, have it go with the brand identity of Rascals. But with the Precious Trust, I think we went hand in hand. Like Wathik would tell me, okay, we need like a spot where people can, change in. So we need a fitting room, but we're on a budget. So we need to we need to kind of think of ways of how to build it on our own, but also like make it look really nice.
Yeah.
So we made like this PT Precious Trust table, and what else? I remember like literally making the walls. The texture of the walls, he wanted like this harsh concrete texture, and we literally got concrete cement and water, and we were mixing it on site. Yeah, we'd stay till like 2 a.m. Yeah, and we like put it on the walls, but it was really nice.
You put so much care into it.
We really did. It was like a baby.
But also, I think something you do really well is think about function, right? You think about space, and you don't think about maybe necessarily the aesthetics first thing. I think you think about how it can suit the humans that are going to occupy that space and how they interact with it. And you move quite past this idea of like buildings, right? Like towers and big structures that I think we assume humans have to shape too. You know what I mean? And I think when we spoke, you mentioned this really great quote. I'm going to try and find it here. Okay, by Bernard Tashumi.
Yes.
That up. Okay, who wrote, and you mentioned it, architecture is not simply about space and form, but also about event, action, and what happens in that space. I think we've lost sight of that a little bit, right? To think of how building isn't just about these grand structures that we adapt to. It's more about that day-to-day spaces which we occupy that we should kind of recenter. How can we like refocus our attention on maybe more creative and natural designs that are actually built for humans?
Right. Honestly, with architecture, it's always about the scale, right? So it's the scale of the human that you're building for, right? So once you disregard that and you start building really big structures that the human, right? Like the human can't really like interpret it, you lose it. Like it becomes very dystopian. And that's where I stop my head from going. Like I never think of towers or structure or like big structures. I genuinely can't. And my brain stops there. I was telling you how like
you think of the space between
like as an architect, I just think of the space around me, and that's where like my head is. I do not go beyond it. You know.
So speaking of your head, how do your designs come into your head? Is it like messy at all or chaotic?
Oh. It is very messy, but what I try to ground myself, and I try to I always say this, I get like 100 thoughts a day, so I try to grab onto one and then literally sketch it really fast, just on a paper or maybe on a note, just write it down on my notes app, and I'll come back to it one way or another, you know. But the true process of how I design is it's things that I always thought about during childhood, even if it's like a form or shape. It's things that I saw during my childhood that I bring into
I
my
love
now,
that.
like the now, right? Like my
love that.
present.
Mm.
And it starts with a sketch, and then
Okay.
it goes from a sketch into material research,
Mm.
maybe light and shadow, study a bit, analysis, and then from that I love 3D modeling. I think 3D modeling is like what I'm great at. I am so fast at it, and so from the sketching I go to 3D modeling, and this is where like I play with the shape and form of let's say what I'm designing, right?
Mm.
And kind of finalize it from there, render it,
Yeah.
and then make the technical drawings. So the
So
technical
thorough.
drawings always go at the end.
Okay, what's your least favorite part of it?
Technical drawings. It's my least favorite is because it's too technical for me. Like I become a robot just making them, right?
So fair.
That's
yeah.
what I was doing at my like first and
Yeah.
last
Okay,
job.
so now you started Circ.
Yes.
What is it? What is behind the name Circ? Circ Studios.
Circ Studio.
Yeah.
The name, I don't, if you guys are Arabic speakers, Circ is the Arabic name of circus, or not the Arabic name. I would say maybe it's also the French name, but in Arabic we do call it Circ. And when I was a kid, I remember my grandpa taking me to the first circus ever in Sharjah. And
nice.
yes, and I went, me and my sister, we went to it was like a big tent structure, white. It was so clean and like very polished. And I remember going inside and like it was a circular seating. And when I saw that, I lost, like, I was like, there's no way, this is what I see in cartoons, right?
Yeah.
And I think what intrigued me was how everyone was in harmony, like people flying in the air, but also someone like walking down a line, like down a rope. And it was just the idea of how it was very random, but still everyone was in harmony. So the show was so like very overstimulating, but at the same time it was so organized and very playful. And I just loved the colors, the costumes, and I still think that till this day, like this is what inspires me.
I love that.
Yeah, the homogeny of like the circus.
And fun.
It's so
And
fun,
just
like
being
yeah, music is
just the vibe.
playing.
Yeah, just being
It's so many things at once, right?
Yeah.
And that's what Circ is about. Circ Studio is about. It's so
Yeah.
many things at once. It's everything.
Yeah, you
It's
combine it
yeah.
all.
It's not
Yeah.
architecture. It's everything around it. It's everything within
Yeah.
it. It's objects, interiors, spaces,
Yeah, but-
events and gatherings, pop-ups.
But do you think architecture is all of that too? Like at the end of the
Exactly.
day?
But
I
that's
think.
what exactly, and that's what people kind of forget,
Yeah, for sure.
right? Like they forget that architecture isn't a tower. It's not.
It's all-
Like
yeah.
it's everything. Like it's everything around you.
Yeah,
right?
and I feel like once you understand that, at least like a lay person who's not like an architect, you also see the world very differently. And I think you have
Yeah.
a higher sensitivity to space, which is really fun to recognize. And kind of
You're into
think-
architecture now, right?
I
Like
am
you're telling
into
me
it.
it's a different world.
Yeah, it
being
is a
aware.
different world. It's kind of like putting on goggles and then you're
Yeah.
just thinking about your built environment and kind of how I think the architecture around us also reflects the socio-cultural dynamics of
100%. Yeah.
the places that we live in. That's another conversation.
Another conversation.
But onto that, I think that brings in this idea of vernacular design, right? And pulling from traditional building techniques within a certain space or place, rather, and implementing them today. And that's something you do incredibly well. What is vernacular design? I feel like it's a word.
So vernacular
more.
design, for anyone who doesn't know, it's
Yeah.
the techniques and traditions of our ancestors, how they built their shelters,
Yeah.
the materials they used,
Yeah.
in their surroundings, right? And
Mhm.
just using that and integrating it to make shelter that's usable, functional, but also with time evolving, they added aesthetics onto it. So they
Mm.
added carvings, they added colors,
That's so
and
cool.
that's essentially like vernacular architecture. It's the foundation of all architecture that we're seeing,
Mm.
right? This is something that you cannot disregard.
Yeah.
The context that you live in, and so a lot of I think architects or designers always disregard that. Like they're just thinking of
Yeah.
you know, like why are we building with concrete when we have a lot, like we can build with clay,
Exactly.
right? Sorry, we can build with clay. I just think that like each environment has has the materials that are surrounding it and that you can use. We can build with palm tree. We can build. There's this studio that makes concrete from date seeds, and so they get date seeds. They eat the
So
dates. They get
cool.
date seeds, and they literally kind of blend it with another material and add water into it. It's just like three materials,
Yeah.
and they make this really really stable kind of concrete. They call it datecrete instead of concrete,
Yeah.
and it's very sustainable. And I think that we should really look into that and look how we can integrate that within our
Mm.
designs, right?
Mm.
But yeah, that's I think vernacular architecture is something you cannot disregard. You should always
Definitely.
integrate it within what you do. And
Yeah. Well, one of your projects, which like I absolutely love, like I'm obsessed with it, is Nassim.
yes,
And so Nassim is basically this concept that you had about creating a workers' rest stop, right? And implementing vernacular cooling methods via traditional
ventilation.
Yeah, I was right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Passive cooling. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
ventilation. And it also looked really nice. I just think it was a really admirable example of what we can do with architecture when it's reoriented towards vernacular design and also social justice.
Right. Yes.
Can you tell me more about it? Because
Of
I love
course.
hearing you talk about it.
Yes. So how Nassim started, it was actually my entrance for a competition. It was called Abwab, and the call was, hey, like integrate vernacular design into an installation. That's all they
Mm.
wanted, and maybe integrate some of the techniques that we're using in our maybe in our surroundings or what our ancestors were celebrating and using within their building. And I think with Nassim, it's designed for our region, our really hot region, where I was inspired by actually the traditional architecture of the UAE. And so if
Really?
you walk
Wow.
around, the old city of Dubai or old city of Sharjah, you can see these structures that are built. So they're like it's like this big tower,
Mm-hmm.
and if you go inside it, the reason it's just an opening in the house. The reason it's this big kind of structure is so that hot air can go inside, and from how long the structure is, as it passes by, it turns into cold air. Yes, and that's what the people who lived here 100 years
It's
ago.
actually crazy.
Yeah,
'cause that's like natural
yeah,
AC.
natural
'Cause
AC.
I didn't
Because
know
AC
this
didn't
existed.
exist.
Yeah.
Like it
But it's like you
This was
think
70
about
years
it,
ago,
you know,
yes.
literally 100 years
Yeah.
ago, like what were they doing? They were
Exact-
not putting on their
right?
AC
How did
at
they live
18
here?
and then just like
just
sleep.
stay.
Yeah.
Exactly.
cool.
So that was very inspiring to me, and the technique of adding. So I had to add these kind of water, let's say, containers
Mm.
under. So actually, let me describe how design works. So you have the corrugated metal roofing with like I would say 8 holes, and you have the linen curtains, and then you have the aluminum structures that are coming down. This is replicating the idea that the people here in the UAE used to
Mm.
build with. So the idea is for that the hot air would come inside, it would turn into cool air, but then also because the water is under it,
Mm.
that water would evaporate, and so it would kind of make the space even cooler, right?
Mm.
So with that evaporation, the condensation, it would make the adding water naturally to any space with air would make it just
Wow.
cooler, like much cooler, and cooler as in cold, not like cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I added the scaffolding because
Yeah.
people who are on sites building, they start with these scaffolding structures and
Mhm.
build the concrete
Yeah.
structure with it, so they can stand on it,
Mm.
go around it. But I was thinking, why not take those scaffoldings and just like put them as a structure for that roof and turn it into a seating with upholstery. And the reason, sorry, I feel like I was very like was I? Did you
Can you
guys hear
guys
me?
hear-
Oh, okay. Imagine
nice.
everyone like was
Yeah. We're just talking.
We're just
with
talking.
ourselves. Yeah.
But yeah, the seating with the upholstery. The reason it's yellow is because having lighter colors reflects the sunlight better,
Yeah.
the UV
Yeah.
rays,
So
right?
we're like.
We're not
We're
doing well
not doing so
today.
well.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's why they tell you during the summer wear like light clothes,
Yeah.
and that's exactly also
the point.
yeah, the point with the furniture or the upholstery. And I also added planters, so it even makes the space more cooler. And so the idea was to just make a space where the construction workers can rest in during their working
That's so
hours
amazing.
and go back to work.
Honestly,
Yeah.
that's so incredible.
Thank you.
Seriously.
And it's not just for the UAE. It works for the
For
entire
everywhere,
region.
yeah.
It works for this like for Africa as well, North Africa. I would say Nigeria. We're thinking that. I was talking to this other designer. I was showing him this design. He was like, "This really works where we're at.
Yeah.
Like the materials. You know, it's versatile. I would say."
It's definitely versatile. I hope it's implemented honestly more. I think it also
Hopefully.
just shows
But
how
I didn't get chosen for the.
well. You should
I'm
be.
still like very
I will
salty
we'll
about
love
it.
you for it. Yeah, I would be salty too.
Yeah,
It's
we're
like actually incredible.
But it's fine.
Seriously. I think that's something that really struck me, right, when I came across your work, is how thoughtful your designs are. And they really take into consideration every single little bit of also being sustainable and also making equitable, inclusive space. This was the second project I think I came across in your work. The first one is a MoMA chair, which I am so obsessed with. You can probably describe it better, but the MoMA chair is this project that Sarra did, which created a private space for women to breastfeed in public, specifically within other regional contexts where I think breastfeeding in public isn't the norm and isn't readily accepted. And also women, I think, want privacy in order to do that, to feel comfortable, but at the same time, they don't want to have to drive all the way home to their homes, you know, and do it there. They want to be able to have that private space in public. And this chair is an excellent solution. I think is also an incredible example of inclusive but also empathetic design. It has so much empathy and thought into that. And I always wonder like how we can prioritize empathy and honestly thoughtfulness to make more inclusive space.
Yeah.
so many different
Honestly,
ways.
with the Amuma chair, it started from, again, noticing my surroundings, right? So I had a friend who had a sister who just gave birth, and she was just like talking about how, like with her child, she goes to work, right? So within the office, the child needs to be breastfed, right? And she's like, oh, I have to go to the car and just like breastfeed for an hour and then come back, and I have to like make up this excuse or like tell them, hey, I need to go to the bathroom. And then whether it's the car or the bathroom, it's not the ideal space, right? It kind of disrupts you from everyday life. And so she was just like talking about it. And at the time I was at Athaf Fellowship, we were designing furniture. And I was like, actually, let me make something for breastfeeding moms. Because again, this is, being a woman designer, I need to be, aware of like what.
Yeah, you also reference your
other-
experience as a woman.
What other women are going through or what other women need. Their physical needs, their cultural needs. And I think that's when the moment chair came about. As a Gen Z architect, I remember like putting a story and putting a story on my Instagram, and what did I say? I was like, oh, any new mamas currently breastfeeding you know of? Would love to ask you some questions. And a lot of moms reached out, and I was talking to them. I met some of them in real life, and I was talking to them online as well. I was just asking them about their experiences and whatnot. And within those experiences, obviously, I got the knowledge or my answers to designing the chair. And so there was so many prototypes. I was building with cardboard. I was building with plastic. The first few prototypes, I was sketching a lot. But then, I didn't add the other. Okay. And then, and then what came about was this structure that you're seeing. It's so you have the curtain, and then you have this cocoon-shaped kind of chair that extends all the way out for the privacy of the mom, right? And a lot of people would say, oh, but breastfeeding should be normal. You should breastfeed in public. Like it shouldn't be a problem. Okay, that's right. But then a lot of women are not comfortable just naturally.
Like we also have to respect the context.
Exactly, and we're in a culture where women don't just do it. You know. And that's exactly why the curtain is there. It's if you're very comfortable with like having people pass around, then cool. Just like open it up, have like breastfeed. But then if you're not comfortable, just close it and breastfeed your baby. And that was essentially the idea of the moment chair.
Amazing. You also just mentioned something. You said as a Gen Z architect. How old are you?
I'm 24.
See, that's crazy.
Like you're 24 too, girl.
I'm 25. I just turned 25.
Are you? Okay.
I turned 25 like 10 days ago. I don't know if I feel my frontal lobe developed though.
Yeah,
can't tell.
I feel it develop. I think
But-
it developed already, like this year
I
for
hope.
me. Yeah,
I don't I don't know. Everyone says I'm supposed to feel different. I don't know.
I don't know.
But what's it like being a Gen Z architect today? Like,
Being a Gen Z architect, it's amazing.
yeah.
I love it. Right, like you're on Instagram, you're on TikTok.
Yeah.
You're always looking at design structures. I don't know. You're also kind of like, yes, I do architecture and I do make architecture and design for people and all that. But I also really love learning TikTok dances. Okay, like this
Yes.
is part of this is part of who I am. You know.
It's playful.
And I also love memes. There's this meme page called Dan Clord, right, where he just uploads memes about architecture, and I'm just
Okay,
like
follow him.
obsessed. I love looking at them. And there was this meme when the building got a random circle window for no real reason, and I
Yeah, I
literally
saw.
designed one of the like the smash room. I really
Yeah.
designed one of the structures with 2 circles just for no reason. And I think that's the idea of being a Gen Z architect is
Okay,
that you can
yeah.
design stuff randomly.
Yeah,
It's
100%.
you
Is
know
there also a sense that there's like no rules and you can be imaginative?
For me, at
for
least.
you,
Yeah.
And so I think one of those kind of no rules is collaboration, right? So
Yes.
you're very big on collaboration with people from completely different disciplines. You know, film, music, dance, food. And I think
Yes.
you did that grazing dinner, right, in
Yes.
2023,
Yes.
which is so incredible. And you said something in the description of it, which I want to bring up because I thought it was so excellent. I think you said something along the lines of architecture is a conversation, it's a cultic
Cultic.
and a symbol.
It's mark, cultic, and
It's-
symbol.
There you go.
Yes.
Yeah, that's so,
So for
beautiful.
me,
Tell me about it.
Yeah. What's your question again?
Yeah, so I want to know more about why you emphasize collaboration so much and maybe a little bit more about this dinner and what it was about. I think you invited so many different artists from different
Yes.
backgrounds.
Yes.
Right?
So yeah, the idea is that in our creative scene, obviously, like it's
Yeah.
filled with musicians, photographers, filmmakers,
Yeah.
DJs, maybe even like artists, but not architects. You know?
Yeah,
Not-
everyone is kind of like
Yeah.
architects do their own
Architects
thing.
are like
you
too-
build.
Yeah, like
خلاص.
you're too serious. You're not welcomed here.
Yeah.
And I
wonder
think
why.
the idea was with the grazing dinner with architecture, the idea was to invite 50, creatives with 50 architects and just have them kind of have conversations about how they can integrate both of these disciplines. Because at the end of the day, architecture is an art form, and just like how music is an
Yeah.
art form. And other than that, the grazing dinner had an exhibition as well with foundation students.
That's so
Their
beautiful.
first take ever on architecture or on model making, and I felt like that really kind of
Yeah.
went hand in hand, like was very related to what grazing dinner was about. It was introducing architecture to those creatives, right? It was telling them how architecture extends way,
Yeah.
much more than towers and buildings. And
It's
it was really nice.
Yeah, I think it's such an important exchange of knowledge too, because I feel like architecture at its core is kind of, problem solving and finding solutions, and every creative discipline needs that.
yes,
You know what I mean?
yes.
And I think it's just an interesting dialogue to have.
Yeah, I do think that maybe it's some people. Some architects are way too formal, way too serious.
Yeah.
We give off that vibe. Not me, but I feel
Try
like
it,
architects give off that vibe. Like they're too like
is it
pretentious,
architect's ego?
Like I'm an architect. Like
yeah, you're
do,
like,
do
don't
not
talk to
come
me.
near me.
Yeah.
I have that, but please do come talk to me. Like yes, I'm an architect.
but
I will
that's so
mention it, but
important.
please come talk to me.
Yeah,
And
but that's so
let's
important. You're
collab,
like, it's
Yeah.
just making architecture accessible.
Yes.
You're really leading on. Also, another intersection which you're working on is fashion and architecture.
Yes.
You're a tabby girl, right?
Yes.
In Dubai Design Week, you had like this cabinet designed for the tabby. What is it about the tabby?
The tabby rack.
Tabby rack.
The
okay.
tabby rack. So obviously,
Okay.
like I love fashion. I love
you as well,
fashion
okay.
girl. So I got my first tabbies as a birthday gift from my sister, and I was literally like, there's no way I own tabbies now, because like at the time I didn't have enough money to really invest into designer, clothing. I would just buy my stuff from like
Yeah.
H&M, Pull&Bear, Bershka. But then once I kind of had a job and, you know, was able to, I had accessibility to other stuff. Those were the first thing that I got, the tabbies.
Really? Why? What is it about the tabby?
Ever since like 2013, I literally I was seeing them all over my Tumblr. Like I would repost tabbies,
Wow, they've been
repost.
around a long
Yes.
time. I didn't really know about them
Ever
before.
since the 80s, actually. So
Yeah, there's a
Martin
story.
Margiela, he started. So okay, a bit of a history lesson. So tabbies actually go way back
Yeah, when you
before
told me this, my mom was
Mason Margiela.
Yeah.
So tabbies is a traditional Japanese footwear that was created in that was made during the 16th century, and it was used to be worn by construction workers, the army, soldiers, even farmers as well, and it was worn by women and men. So it was very gender like neutral, and it was very affordable. It used to it was made from kind of plastic or maybe leather material, and I think with Martin Margiela maybe being very inspired by that Japanese footwear, he kind of took it and made it more exclusive. He put a heel to it, you know, and just the history of it and how it
100%.
evolved from something that was very accessible to something that was
so
very
like
exclusive,
a luxury item,
you know?
right? I think, although you know, Margiela was probably just referencing something that he was quite inspired by. I think there's something interesting in the way that making it inaccessible and kind of a luxury item erased that history, which I think you bringing back in this kind of very dynamic, interesting shape, and also referencing that history is really, really cool.
Yes. So I remember like during the exhibition, people would come and they'd be like, hey, like tell us about your design. I would be like, are you familiar with tabbies? They're like, yes, Mason Margiela. I'm like, but there is like much.
But did you know?
But did you know like this is from the 16th century in Japan?
That's crazy.
And usually the answer would be no. A lot of people just think it just associated with Mason Margiela, but it goes way beyond that. And I think I love the idea of that, and I kind of wanted to celebrate it within the tabby rack and the silhouette of the tabby, kind of taking that and integrating it as a split and in the rack, just and the finish as well. I had my tabbies are that same exact finish, and I kind of like replicated it into the tabby rack. So I had to literally paint it white by hand and then paint it black and then wait and then paint it white again and then sand it off and have a veneer finish onto it to get that look, that like, you know, aged punk look.
That's so interesting.
But yeah, the process was really nice.
Yeah, and you're getting more into fashion and architecture.
Yes.
And also, what can they learn from each other? You know, what can fashion learn from architecture and vice versa?
A lot, honestly. It's literally the same, but let's say micro scale and macro scale. So small and big. With fashion, it's you study the materials, the fluidity, how things kind of flow, or even the structural integrity of how things, you know, are, stable on your body, how they kind of fit. So it's the same thing as how you would choose the material for a building, right? But it's small and big. And I think architecture would influence fashion with the structure that it works with, and vice versa. Fashion with the materiality. And I've seen, I remember like looking at a lot of case studies during my uni days, and just being inspired a lot by, let's say, Alexander McQueen. He used to work a lot with, rest in peace. He used to work a lot with those fabrics that kind of, I don't know, like bounce a bit. It looked like origami. And you have Issey Miyake as well. Like he's literally a legend for making pieces that literally look like structural paper, but it's really not. And I think it goes way beyond the structures. It goes it kind of touches into let's say sense or how you touch that fabric, right? So yeah, I think
it's so imaginative.
It's very imaginative.
But I think that's something that you really center in your practice. And I keep saying it, but it's just so playful, so fun. So accessible.
Very accessible.
But I've heard that I think in traditional architecture school, which you come from a traditional background, right, in training, they can sometimes maybe zap that out of you in favor of very rigid training.
100%.
And that's something I noticed with the first issue of Dazed that we just came out. We did this activation with students from the University of Sharjah. They were second-year students, and we gave them prompts to reimagine like abandoned buildings.
Yes.
And they did that, but they couldn't think outside, right? They wanted floor plans, they wanted every single detail, and they were so stressed because they didn't have that. But we wanted it to be fun, right? We wanted them to kind of go in their wildest dreams. If they want to design, like, I don't know, a spaceship in that thing or whatever.
Yeah.
And they found it so hard, and it took a lot of kind of working with them to get them out of their bubble.
Yes,
right?
yes. And I would say I was also stuck in that bubble for a bit.
Really?
During uni, yes. When you're in architecture school, it's very kind of ABC, right? And so it's very technical as well. Like you're not, I remember like describing one of my designs as like, yeah, this is nice design. And one of my professors going feral. He's like, you can't use the word nice in architecture school.
Why?
Use mesmerizing. I was intrigued. And I was like, why? Like, I want to use nice. I want to use the word cute, you know? And that's the first thing I did when I graduated. I was like, I want to do all of this and call it nice and cute. I don't want to be deep by describing
I don't
it
want to be deep. I just want to be
in a like hard vocabulary complex. Yeah, like, I want it to be accessible by all, right? So that's with architecture school, it's, I mean, in my uni at least, it was very fun as well. A lot of our professors were freaks. So that really allowed me to kind of take on what I'm doing right now. They would, they would allow you to kind of also think outside of the box. But I would say with foundation students and second year students, it's a bit hard. But as you grow older and as you
can be a little bit more
year by year, it becomes easier for you to kind of block that.
It feels a bit silly to ask this because you're literally 24. But if you could say anything to, I guess, young students in architecture school today and give them any advice, like, what would it be?
One thing that I struggled with is that, so in architecture, you do model making, you learn 3D modeling, you learn how to draw, sketching, also construction drawings, and it's all part of like a project that you present, right? And so I remember like being really harsh on myself because I really wanted to be great at all of these 5 things or all of these 6 things, but you can't, like you possibly can't. Like there'll always be someone who's so good at model making, but really bad at like let's say sketching or construction drawings. And I think my advice is to truly not be tough on yourself.
And that's so hard today.
Do not compare yourself because if you end up comparing, you'll lose your project. Just focus on the concept, like. However medium you want to present it in, focus on that. If you're great at model making, then present it in a great model. If you're great in 3D modeling, then do amazing renders. And I remember like my model making skills were bad. Like the glue, you would see the glue stains.
Really?
It's like wobbly. And I would be so upset every time like I would present my model, like I would like hide it. Like it would be like in the back. But it's, it's all part of the process. Like
trust the process.
Trust the process. Like it's all,
Is there an element, because you obviously were explaining how, fresh out of uni, you got this Soul DXP stand. Is there an element of like fake it till you make it, or not, or more trust the process?
Trust the process.
Because I love the motto like fake till you make it. Do you know what I mean? I don't think be fake. Do you know what I mean? But own it, even if you're not experienced.
Oh
like,
for sure own it. Because I remember like when I told you when Talal like called me to make, I did not know how to make a real structure stand. But I had to like research, do my structural calculations, and like literally like learn everything. But no, for sure, like own it. Just like do it and it'll definitely work.
For sure.
But like put your soul into it. Do not.
I want to bring it to this project that you did for an exhibition, which really touched me, and it's the Material Fabrication School of Gaza. Did I get that right?
Yes.
And I want to kind of explain it, but I think you would do better at it.
So actually, this was during, the October 7th happened, and obviously like I was devastated. I couldn't design, think, render, nothing. Like I couldn't possibly do anything with architecture or design, and I was just like standing there. And I remember I was also at the time with Soul designing, but it was easier to design with Soul because I had Josh with me. He's one of the owners, and he's also the head designer of Soul. And obviously that was very easy because it was like
Yeah.
he would give me comments and I would kind of like replicate them into
Yeah.
my designs. But with the material and fabrication school, it was kind of my take into living in a world where
Yeah.
occupation exists, right?
Yeah.
And with what was happening in Gaza, it kind of felt right to. You were mentioning like speculative design, and
Yeah,
this was
exactly.
this was my take on speculative design in Gaza. I cannot go to Palestine. I cannot visit. I cannot visit Gaza. And
Me
as an
too.
architect, you have to visit the site to design for it, right? I cannot do that. But because I can't do that, I think the school of material fabrication of Gaza was very, I would say, abstract in a way, right?
Yeah.
Like you can tell, like structurally, you don't
Yeah.
know if this will work or not. But the idea was to kind of shed a light on how the occupation also kind of controls the materials that go into
Yeah.
Gaza with building. Like they really calculate the amount of concrete, cement bags that go into Gaza. That was before the war, and they calculate the amount of metal that goes inside. And it was the idea of okay,
Resourceable.
let's make our
Yeah.
own materials, right? In Gaza,
100%.
let's what surrounding
Yeah.
materials can we use into making things that are used for building, right? And I think that was the idea. And having those cylinder spheres inside were another take on kind of shedding light on how fragile living in Gaza is. Like at any time, the school can literally,
yeah.
go down. And those spheres are what like where the students can go inside, where the
100%.
archives are, where those precious material studies can be placed in.
Yeah.
And
It's so important. It's such
yeah.
an, I think, thinking about the future, right, and speculative design, speculating about what the future could look like within the present moment is such an important exercise for being able to criticize the present and also think about where we want to go from here. And using architecture to do it is so fundamental
yes,
because we're talking about actually building the world
Literally,
literally with what we have.
yes.
And I think that project honestly spoke volumes to me, especially in the context of the time that it came.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. Our final question.
Yes.
What do you hope the future of architecture is going to look like?
The future of architecture?
It's a big question, but to end on. 5 words.
I don't know what to say. Future of architecture. I hope that we can take the context that we live in more into perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of focus more onto the micro scale.
Yeah.
Focus more onto human scale as well. I hope that architecture in the future does not disregard that. And just because years are passing by doesn't mean that we need to build bigger and taller and longer and huge structures. No, I think we should always ground ourselves, literally ground ourselves, because like, ground, like clay, ground, materials from our surroundings, and integrate that within our designs. Yeah.
It's so beautiful. Okay, thank
Thank
you
you,
so
Sarah.
much. Thank you for hearing us.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're great.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Okay.